68,630. That's the number of interviews carried out so far across all 50 U.S. states by polling company YouGov. Its MRP technique, which works differently to most models, predicted the result of last year's UK general election within 12 seats. Now, it's the latest forecast for the presidency, and YouGov says Joe Biden is set to sail past the 270 winning line, taking 343 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 195. Well, joining us this morning is Marcus Roberts. He's Director of International Products at YouGov. Marcus, I mean, the polls really, so much focus on the polls and whether they're right. You have a slightly different methodology to what we've seen to American polls. Why do you think yours is better?
What we're trying to do is look at more data than ever before. As you said, nearly 70,000 interview respondents alone in this MRP model, which takes into account a variety of national polling data as well as individual battleground state data. And that's important because if we remember what happened 4 years ago when polling went a bit wrong, the national picture was correct in terms of the difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But the battleground state picture, which determines who makes it to 270 electoral college votes and thus the presidency, was wrong. So what our model does, our MRP, is it combines that battleground state polling with national polling data and other sources of data to give us a more accurate picture based upon these very large data sets. And that's why we can say with greater confidence this time what the state of the race is, which seems to be a clear advantage to former Vice President Biden.
Marcus, what do you do with the people? And we hear that actually speaking to people close to the president, advisors and, aides, saying that actually a lot of these polls, and we didn't ask you then specifically about YouGov, but a lot of these polls are skewed because there are people that will vote for Trump but are too embarrassed to tell the pollsters.
The famous phenomenon of the shy Trump voter. Well, I think that if anyone who has noticed how the president's fans tend to respond to the president over the last few years, there's very little shy about them. Trump voters tend to be very proud of their voting intention. They tend to be very loud about their voting intention. If anything, we sometimes wonder if there might be something more of a shy Biden voter effect in this election, actually, with some Republicans who are a little bit concerned about passing a vote for the Democrats for the first time ever, but might be willing to do so. And so we're trying to poll more carefully into that as well. But as for the myth of the shy Trump voter, I tend to think that it's a convenient excuse both for pollsters who have got things wrong in the past and also for campaigns that might not be doing so well in the polls.
So there's not a female shy Trump voter, Marcus. I mean, if you break it down, it actually, the factions. So you have the Trump base, very vocal, very pro the president. You have the Democrats, progressive, okay, pro Biden. And then there's this elusive, how do the female voters vote because they found the president much too aggressive in the debate? What are your polls saying about that demographic?
Sure. Suburban women are some of the most important voters in this election. It was because President Trump was able to keep his margin of defeat with them narrower in 2016 than was expected against Hillary Clinton that he was able to win the presidency in the first place. But what has happened in this election is suburban female voters have been leaving the Trump bandwagon in their droves. They've been leaving it mainly because of the coronavirus crisis, but also our polls show because they don't like the tone or the tenor and the general unpresidentialness of much of the Trump presidency. That was manifested very clearly in terms of the debate last week and the handling, or rather mishandling, of the coronavirus crisis that affected the White House thereafter only probably compounded that. And that's why it looks like instead of losing those voters by a narrow margin like he did in 2016, 68% of suburban women are currently looking upon the president with disapproval.